My father ignored me for his golden child stepdaughter. I chose to return the favor. Emotional hook. 1 to 2 sentences. First 10 seconds. Can you imagine a love so manipulative, so utterly twisted, that it weaponizes grief and uses your dead mother's memory as a pawn? Because for 8 agonizing years, my own father fell victim to it, and I was the one left to pick up the pieces and expose the terrifying truth about the woman he brought into our lives. My dad and I, we were a team, a real unbreakable unit, especially after Mom died. I was just 14, a scared kid navigating a world without her, and Dad, he was lost, completely adrift. But we clung to each other. We figured it out. Together. He'd always tell me I was his whole world, his anchor, that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever change that. And I believed him. With my entire broken heart, I believed him. Then, when I was 17, she walked in. Carol. She seemed fine. Harmless, even. At first. She'd show up for dinner, always with some fancy dessert, asking me about college plans, pretending to care. She had a daughter, Megan, who was 15. I remember the first time I met Megan so vividly. Her eyes scanned our house, almost dismissively. "It's smaller than I expected," she drawled, like she was evaluating real estate. "Then, do you have a pool?" When Dad, looking a little embarrassed, said no, Megan rolled her eyes. Literally. "My father's house has 2, she sniffed. Carol just laughed, a soft, indulgent sound, and said, "Megan's just used to nice things." That laugh, that comment, that should have been the alarm bell screaming in my ears. But I was just a kid, desperate for my dad to find some happiness, some comfort after Mom. I had no idea what was coming. Not long after, Dad and Carol got married, and then the real changes began. They moved into our house. Carol claimed it made sense. We had more space than her small apartment. What she conveniently forgot to mention was that Megan needed the biggest bedroom for all her stuff. My room. The one Mom had painted purple for me, my favorite shade. The room with the window seat where Mom and I used to curl up, reading stories together. That was my sanctuary, my last tangible connection to her. Dad, my rock, my whole world, Dad just shrugged. "It's just a room," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Megan needs space for her furniture." Just a room? My heart shattered a little more right then. I was relegated to the guest room, half the size, cold and unfamiliar. My old room, Mom's room, was soon overflowing with Megan's designer clothes and makeup. She even complained the closet was too small. Then the ultimate insult. She painted over Mom's beautiful purple walls. Black, because, she declared, purple is childish. Megan made my life an absolute hell. She'd use my things without asking, and inevitably, she'd break them. My laptop? Smashed. Her excuse? It was old anyway. My grandmother's necklace, a precious heirloom? Lost at one of her parties. "You shouldn't have left it where I could find it," she said, even though it was tucked away in my jewelry box in my own room. But the worst, the absolute worst, was the day she told everyone at school my mom had killed herself because she couldn't stand having such a boring daughter. It was a lie. A cruel, vicious, soul-crushing lie. Mom died of cancer. A long, painful battle. When I finally, tearfully, told Dad, Carol swooped in. "Megan's just adjusting," she cooed. "You need to be more understanding." And my dad nodded. "We need to be a family," he said. My stomach churned. Family? This wasn't family. This was war. And I was losing. Megan's torment was constant. She'd eat my packed lunches, leaving me nothing. If I put my name on my food, she'd toss it, claiming it looked expired. She'd delete my TV recordings for her trashy reality shows. Every time I tried to defend myself, she'd run to Dad, fabricating stories about me being mean, and Carol would always back her up. Slowly, insidiously, Dad started believing them. He'd lecture me, tell me I needed to be welcoming, that Mom would want me to be kind. Kind to someone systematically destroying my life? It was infuriating. But nothing, Absolutely nothing compared to the college fund. That was the ultimate, soul-crushing betrayal. Dad had been saving for my college since the day I was born. Mom's life insurance, her legacy, had gone into it too. It was my future secured. I'd worked my butt off, got into my dream school with a partial scholarship, and that fund was supposed to cover the rest. 2 months before graduation, Dad sat me down. My heart thumped with anticipation, thinking he was proud. Instead, he said, "Megan needs the money more." The words hung in the air, a cruel, impossible sentence. She hadn't gotten any scholarships, he explained, and Carol couldn't afford her dream school. My dad, my own father, looked me in the eye and told me I was smart enough to get loans and work my way through, like he did. He actually said Megan didn't have the same opportunities one had. I stared at him, numb, a cold rage building in my chest. "What opportunities are those, Dad?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He couldn't answer. He just looked away. In that moment, I realized I didn't recognize the man sitting across from me anymore. My world wasn't just broken. It was shattered into a million pieces, and he was holding the hammer. So I worked. 3 jobs through college. While Megan posted endless photos of sorority parties, lavish vacations, new cars, all funded by my dead mother's money. My money. Dad would like every single one of her posts, commenting how proud he was. Meanwhile, my dean's list announcements, my academic achievements, the late nights, the sacrifices? Crickets. Not a single comment. Not a word. When I graduated, my father wasn't there. He missed it, because Megan had a dance recital. That same day. "Carol, ever the puppeteer," simply said. "Family has to support each other." What a bitter joke. I stood there, cap and gown on, watching other families embrace, celebrating their children's achievements, feeling utterly, completely alone. After college, I landed a good job at an investment firm. It felt like a fresh start, a way to build a life away from them. I stopped going home, except for major holidays. But even then, Megan would find a way to ruin it. She'd mock my job, saying, "Anyone can just move money around." She'd dredge up embarrassing high school stories, twisting them, making them sound worse in the telling. She'd complain my gifts weren't expensive enough, even though she never gave anyone anything. And Dad, he'd just wave it off. "That's how sisters act," he'd say. Sisters. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Then, last month, I got a call from Dad. He wanted to meet for coffee. Just the 2 of us. It was strange, unexpected. My guard was instantly up. He said he had something important to discuss. And then he dropped the bomb. He was planning to formally adopt Megan. She was 25 years old. 25. He mumbled something about estate planning and wanting to show Carol he truly accepted Megan as his daughter. Then, the kicker, he wanted my blessing. He actually said, "You'll always be my real daughter, but Megan deserves to feel included." Included? My blood ran cold. I asked if Megan knew. "It's a surprise for her birthday," he said, beaming. "A surprise. For her." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What exactly has Megan done?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm, "to deserve this?" He stammered, listing off things like her visiting on holidays, posting photos with him online, calling him Dad sometimes. My patience snapped. "Dad." I cut him off. "Do you remember when she threw away all Mom's photos because dead people were creepy?" He waved it off. "That was years ago." My jaw clenched. "Do you remember when she sold Mom's wedding dress online for concert tickets?" He flinched. "Carol handled that," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. I pressed on, my voice rising. "Do you remember missing my graduation for her dance recital?" The silence was deafening. He went quiet, just sat there, staring at his untouched coffee, utterly speechless. This was it, the final straw. "You can adopt whoever you want, Dad," I finally said, my voice ice cold. "But I have something to tell you first." His head snapped up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. I took a deep breath. The week Carol and Meghan moved in, I began something felt off. So I hired a private investigator. His eyes widened. It turns out Carol has been married 3 times before. Every single husband was a widower. Every single one had money. And every single marriage ended exactly when the money ran out. He sat there, frozen. My words hung in the air, a chilling accusation. His coffee, untouched, steamed between us. I watched his face go pale, processing the horror of what I'd just revealed. He opened his mouth, then closed it twice, before finally a strained whisper escaped. How could you possibly know this? I didn't answer with words. Instead, I slid a manila folder across the table. It was thick. Inside were marriage certificates, divorce records, financial documents Eve Larson, my investigator, had meticulously compiled over the past 8 years. His eyes dropped to the folder, then back to me, disbelief warring with dawning terror. I explained it all. That first week, I reiterated, something just felt wrong. The way Carol pushed herself into our lives so fast. He started flipping through the pages, his hands shaking slightly. Marriage certificates for a widower in Ohio, money gone in 3 years. Another in Michigan. Then Pennsylvania. Each story eerily identical. Each husband a recent widower. Each with inheritance or life insurance. Each marriage ending the moment the funds were depleted. It was a pattern. A terrifying, undeniable pattern. Suddenly, he slammed the folder shut, pushing it away as if it were toxic. "This has to be fake," he insisted, his voice cracking. "You probably hired some con artist to make this up because you never gave Carol a fair chance." The accusation stung deeply, but I'd expected it. Denying reality was his go-to move. Without a word, I pulled out my phone. I showed him the Facebook profiles of 2 of Carol's ex-husbands. Their profiles publicly confirming the marriages. The timelines matching the documents exactly. He stared at the screen, a long, agonizing silence stretching between us. Finally, he looked up, his eyes bloodshot. Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" A bitter laugh escaped me. "I tried, Dad. 8 years ago. I tried to tell you something felt off. And you accused me of being jealous. Unwelcoming. So I learned. I learned to keep my mouth shut. And I learned to document everything instead." "What do you expect me to do with this information now?" he demanded, his voice thick with confusion and anger. "I don't expect anything," I countered, my voice flat. "But you needed to know the truth before you legally adopted Meghan and made Carol's latest con official in the eyes of the law." He still tried to fight it, insisting there must be an explanation, that maybe Carol just had bad luck in past marriages, but that she genuinely loved him. "Have you noticed," I asked, my gaze piercing, "how Carol's been pushing you to update your will lately?" His eyes darted away, then back to me, the color draining from his face as the realization hit. She'd brought it up just last week. "Her pattern is consistent, Dad," I pressed on. "Move in quickly, integrate Meghan, isolate you from your children, drain the finances, then vanish when there's nothing left." He still tried to argue. "But we still have plenty of money," he said, almost pleading. "Your theory doesn't make sense." That's when I produced the final, devastating blow. I pulled out more documents, bank statements, obtained through means I didn't need to explain. They showed it all. The college fund that was supposed to be mine, completely empty. And for the past 5 years, large transfers, consistent transfers, from his accounts directly into accounts in Meghan's name. Dad's face went from pale to a furious, mottled red as his eyes scanned the numbers. 5,000 here, 8,000 there, all coded as education expenses, but stretching on for years after Meghan had already graduated. The lies, the deception, it was all laid bare. He slammed his fist on the table. "How did you get my bank records?" he roared, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. "I'll call the police. That's invasion of privacy." I met his furious gaze, my own expression calm. Go ahead, I challenged, my voice steady. I work in finance, Dad. I know exactly which records are legally obtainable, which databases are public information. Everything in this folder came from legitimate sources. He scraped his chair back, the sound harsh and grating, and stood up abruptly. The folder, a damning testament to Carol's betrayal, lay open between us. I need time to think, he stammered, running a hand through his hair. I can't process this right now. His hands trembled as he fumbled with his jacket zipper, his entire body radiating disbelief. Take all the time you need, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. But understand this, I won't be attending any adoption ceremony. I won't pretend to be happy about you giving Megan legal rights to Mom's memory, to her legacy. He stopped halfway to the door. He just looked at me, his eyes glistening, but no tears fell. No words. He simply walked out, leaving me alone. Alone with 2 untouched, now cold coffees. The silence in the cafe was deafening. 3 days. 3 agonizing days of silence. I found myself checking my phone more than I cared to admit. Every few minutes, waiting for his name to light up the screen. Work kept me busy, a welcome distraction, but my mind was elsewhere. I'd stare at spreadsheets, the numbers blurring into meaningless patterns. On the 3rd night, while I was trying to cook dinner, my phone finally rang. It was him. Dad's voice was tired, strained, like he'd aged a decade in 72 hours. He wanted to meet again. A different coffee shop this time, he insisted. Somewhere across town. Somewhere we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I agreed. The next morning, I found him already there, hunched in a dark corner booth, his back to the wall. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Dark circles sagged under his eyes. His shirt rumpled as if he'd just pulled it from a heap on the floor. He looked broken. But then I noticed the coffee. He'd already ordered mine. Just the way I liked it, cream and 2 sugars. That small, familiar gesture, after all the pain, it hit me unexpectedly. It was a tiny spark of the old Dad. He began to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. He'd started going through his old financial records at home. Carol, blissfully unaware, thought he was just organizing for tax season. What he found, it was worse than he'd imagined. Purchases he didn't remember approving. Credit cards he didn't even know existed. All in Carol's name, yet linked to his accounts. His hands, again, started to shake as he talked, his eyes darting to the door, a haunted look, as if he expected Carol to walk in at any moment. Did you confront Carol about any of this? I asked, my voice low. No, he said quickly, almost too quickly. I wanted to verify your information first, before making accusations. He paused, taking a shaky breath. The more I looked, the more irregularities I found. Going back years. Charges that made no sense. Withdrawals he never authorized. Accounts he didn't even open. Then, with a desperate motion, he pulled out his own folder. It was even thicker than mine, stuffed with printed credit card statements, marked with yellow highlighter and sticky notes in his familiar, shaky handwriting. He spread them across the table between our coffee cups. His finger, trembling, traced down columns of charges. Expensive stores, restaurants he'd never visited, timeshares he never bought in places he's never seen, a car lease for the vehicle Megan drove, the one he believed they bought outright 3 years ago. He'd been paying monthly lease payments, completely unaware, while Carol told him it was a cash graduation gift. The total? Over $80,000 in the last 3 years alone. His voice cracked, shattered, as he whispered the number out loud. He looked at me, defeated, utterly lost. What do you think I should do? He asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and fragile. And in that moment, I realized something profound. This was the first time in 8 years he had asked my opinion about anything important. Not about Carol, not about Megan, not about money, not about us. Nothing. You need to consult an attorney, I told him, my voice firm, before you confront Carol. She's done this 3 times before, Dad. She'll have strategies, explanations, ways to turn this back on you. You need professional help to protect yourself." He looked utterly terrified. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Scared of being alone again." He stared into his coffee, his gaze distant. "After Mom died, I felt like I was drowning. Carol," she seemed like a lifeline. Someone who understood loss, who could help me through it. Someone who made the house feel less empty. My heart ached. A complex mix of sorrow and resentment. "I understand loneliness, Dad," I said, my voice tight with memory. "I felt it too. When you chose Carol and Megan over me. When you stopped coming to my school events. When you missed my graduation. When you forgot my birthday 3 years in a row." I met his gaze, unflinching. "But loneliness, Dad, is better than being deliberately bled dry by someone who sees you as a mark. Better to be alone than to be used." We sat in silence, the quiet conversation around us a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil inside our booth. The coffee shop filled with the morning rush, customers ordering their drinks to go. Dad watched them, his eyes vacant, as if trying to remember what normal life looked like. Finally, he asked, Do you know an attorney?" I gave him Donald Larson's name. "He specializes in estate law, Dad, and he has experience with financial exploitation cases. He's also Eve Larson's husband, the PI. So he's already familiar with the investigation." A small, cautious hope flickered in his eyes. The following week, Dad met with Donald Larson. He called me afterward, still in his car, parked outside the attorney's office. His voice was even more shaken, raw with a fear I hadn't heard since Mom died. Donald had confirmed it. Carol's pattern was classic financial exploitation. He'd seen it many times before. The immediate advice: secure his accounts. Immediately. Legal separation to protect what was left. Change passwords, revoke Carol's access. Move money to new accounts she knew nothing about. Do it all before any confrontation. Because the moment Carol realized he knew, she'd drain whatever she could get her hands on, fast. "Are you going to confront her?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Or just separate finances quietly?" "Donald said secure everything first," he whispered, "before any confrontation. She'll drain everything the second she knows." He was very clear. Don't tip her off. Don't give her warning. Don't assume she won't act fast. He sounded scared. Truly, deeply scared. The kind of primal fear I remembered from the immediate aftermath of Mom's death. Do you really think Carol would do that?" he asked, his voice wavering. "Take everything and run?" "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "She's done it 3 times before. To 3 other men." The line went quiet. All I could hear was the distant hum of traffic in the background, a silent testament to his dawning horror. The next week was a blur of covert operations. Dad worked with Donald, meticulously transferring funds to new accounts Carol couldn't touch, removing her name from credit cards, documenting every questionable transaction for legal action. He had to maintain normal behavior at home. "It's the hardest acting job of my life," he confessed to me later. Every morning, he'd kiss Carol goodbye, pretending everything was fine. Every evening, he'd ask about her day, feign interest in Megan's latest drama, all while systematically dismantling her financial web, building a legal case against the woman sleeping inches away from him. He called me every other day from his car during lunch breaks, his voice tight with stress, constantly asking, "Am I doing the right thing?" I reminded him Carol had done this to 3 other men. She would do it to someone else if he didn't stop her. The elaborate charade lasted 9 excruciating days. Then something broke. Carol discovered something was wrong when her credit card was declined at an expensive restaurant. She came home furious, incandescent with rage, confronting Dad, demanding to know why her card wasn't working. Dad played dumb, stammering about a bank error, promising to call them in the morning. But when he related to me later that night, his voice was trembling, panic barely concealed beneath the forced calm. Carol was suspicious now, demanding access to bank statements, checking accounts online, relentless with her questions. Dad could barely deflect her. Donald advised him to accelerate the timeline. Full confrontation within the next few days. They couldn't maintain the pretense much longer. Carol was too smart, too ruthless. She would figure it out. But before Dad could even work up the courage to initiate the confrontation, something entirely unexpected happened. Megan showed up at my workplace. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was just leaving for a coffee run when I spotted her near the entrance. She looked completely out of place in jeans and a hoodie, constantly glancing around like she was terrified of being recognized. When our eyes met, she practically ran to me. "Can we talk?" she whispered, her voice tight. "Somewhere private?" My first instinct was to just walk away, to ignore her, but something in her body language stopped me cold. She looked scared, not angry, scared. We ended up in my car, deep in the parking garage. Doors locked, engine off, the concrete walls echoing our strained silence. Megan sat in the passenger seat, picking nervously at her cuticles, refusing to meet my gaze. "Carol sent me," she admitted, her voice barely audible, to feel out what you know, and if you're planning to cause problems." Her honesty shocked me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why aren't you just playing along with her plan?" She finally looked at me, her eyes clouded with something I hadn't seen before, genuine distress. "I'm tired," she confessed, her voice cracking. "Tired of being Carol's puppet. I'm starting to realize my mother has been using me as a tool to manipulate men for years." She swallowed, her voice dropping even lower. "She's been pushing me to flirt with Dad's business partner. He's a recent widower. It made me feel sick." The pieces, for her, were finally clicking together. The entire grotesque picture. I looked her straight in the eye. "Did you know about Carol's previous marriages?" I asked directly. The pattern of financial exploitation. She stopped picking at her cuticles. For the first time since we'd gotten into the car, she looked at me. She admitted she knew Carol had been married before, but she'd always believed her mother's stories, that the men were jerks, or the timing was bad, or whatever convenient narrative Carol spun. Only recently had she started questioning if any of it added up. Then the floodgates opened. Carol was pressuring her to get engaged to Dad's business partner's son, a man Megan barely knew, constantly raving about how much money that family has. She detailed how Carol coached her, what to say, how to act, what to wear around certain men. As she spoke, I watched her entire worldview crack. Her face grew paler, her hands started to shake. The realization was hitting her in real time, the full, sickening scope of her mother's manipulations. "Do you really have proof about Carol's previous marriages?" she asked, her voice small. I pulled out my phone and showed her copies of the documents from Eve's investigation. Marriage certificates, divorce records, financial statements. The same pattern, 3 times over. I watched Megan's face crumble as she scrolled through the damning evidence. Her entire childhood, built on her mother conning grieving widowers. She started to cry, not pretty tears, but raw, ugly sobs that racked her whole body. She was disgusted with herself, she said, for going along with it, for taking my college fund, for being so cruel to me all those years. She knew something felt wrong. She confessed, but Carol said it was fine, and the money made life easier, and she just didn't want to look too closely. Her breakdown seemed genuine, but I was cautious. After 8 years of watching her manipulate Dad, of her fake tears and calculated charm, I couldn't be sure this wasn't just another performance. I silently handed her a wad of tissues from my glove compartment and waited. When her sobs finally subsided and she could breathe normally again, I spoke. "If you really want to make things right," I said, my voice measured, "you need to be willing to testify honestly about what you've witnessed. If this goes to court, real consequences, real testimony, real accountability, not just an apology in my car, and then back to business as usual. Her red eyes met mine. What kind of testimony? She whispered. I explained that Dad was working with an attorney to protect himself from Carol, that legal proceedings were likely, and that the truth about Carol's pattern had to come out. If you want to prove you're serious about changing, I told her, you need to be willing to tell the truth, even if it hurts Carol, even if it means admitting your own role in everything. She nodded slowly, wiping her face, and asked, "What should I do?" Her agreement was immediate. "I'll tell the truth about everything," she vowed, her voice steadier, infused with a newfound determination. And then she revealed it all. Carol's explicit coaching on how to make Dad feel guilty, how to perfectly position herself as the daughter he always wanted. That first day when we met, Carol specifically told her to mention her real dad's pool, his nice things, all to make Dad feel inadequate, to make him try harder. She'd been coached to act disappointed with our house, with Dad's job, with everything, so he'd feel obligated to make her happy. Carol would rehearse conversations with her, practice facial expressions, plan out elaborate scenarios where Megan needed something expensive, ensuring Dad would feel compelled to provide. The whole thing, she realized, had been calculated from day one. Carol used to tell me that widowers are easy marks, Megan confided, her voice now cold, devoid of emotion. Desperate to rebuild their families, desperate to prove they can make everyone happy. The clinical, chilling way Carol talked about these men as mere resources to extract from made my stomach churn. Then she pulled out her phone. Text messages from Carol. Explicit instructions on how to act around Dad, what to say to get what she wanted, how to play the victim if I complained. The evidence was far more extensive than I'd anticipated. She offered to forward everything. I have years of messages saved, she said. I gave her my email and watched as years of meticulously planned deception began transferring to my phone. This could change everything. 2 days later, the confrontation finally happened. Dad, armed with all the evidence, faced Carol. He called me from Donald's office afterward, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him at first. He'd done it at home, in the kitchen, right after Megan left for work. He laid out the folders on the table. The marriage certificates, the financial records, the damning timeline of her pattern. Carol's face, he said, went utterly blank for a moment, like she was calculating her next move. First, she tried to deny everything. The documents were fake. He was paranoid, and I had poisoned his mind. But when Dad showed her the bank statements, with her own signatures, the undeniable transfers to Megan's accounts, she switched tactics. Fast. The previous marriages? Complicated situations he couldn't possibly understand. Those men were abusive, controlling. She was the victim. She claimed she and Megan just did what they had to do to survive. Her explanations grew more elaborate, more desperate, as Dad, for the first time, pushed back with facts. When none of that worked, Carol snapped. She got angry, accused Dad of being ungrateful after everything she'd done for him. She reeled off a list of how she'd improved his life, made his house a home, given him a ready-made family, and helped him move on from his dead wife. Dead wife. The way she said it, it made Dad's blood run cold, as if Mom was just some inconvenient obstacle Carol had helped him get over. Per Donald's advice, Dad had recorded the entire confrontation on his phone. Later, in the lawyer's office, Donald made him listen to it twice, dissecting Carol's tactics. It was a masterclass in manipulation. In under 10 minutes, Carol cycled through tears, anger, accusations, and outright gaslighting. From sobbing about how much she loved him, to screaming about what an ungrateful bastard he was, to trying to hug him and say they could work through this, to threatening to take everything in a divorce. The recording captured every subtle shift in pitch, every calculated pause, every strategic tear. Hearing it back, Dad realized how many times she'd done this before, and how easily he'd fallen for it. How many arguments had ended with him apologizing for upsetting her. How many times she'd twisted things until he questioned his own memory, his own judgment. Listening to it made him physically ill. Donald assured him the recording would be invaluable if Carol tried to claim Dad was making false accusations or having a mental breakdown. Her own words were incontrovertible proof of her pattern. Carol moved out of the house within 24 hours, and she didn't go quietly. Dad came home from work the next day to find half the furniture gone. Her clothes cleared from the closet. Most of the kitchen items vanished. She hadn't asked. She hadn't negotiated. She just took what she wanted while he was at the office. Megan texted me from Carol's car, a desperate message. She tried to stay, she said, but Carol wouldn't let her, practically dragging her out with threats about betraying family. And then the smear campaign began. Immediately, Carol started calling Dad's friends and family, spinning her version of events. Dad was having a mental breakdown. I had been manipulating him for years because I never accepted her. He was making wild accusations based on fake documents provided by his bitter daughter. She cried on the phone, a performance of victimhood, lamenting how she'd given him 8 years of her life, and this was how he repaid her. Vague, dramatic messages about betrayal and family loyalty appeared on social media, quickly shared and supported by her loyal network. Within hours, Dad's phone was blowing up. Calls and texts from people who'd known him for decades. Some were simply worried, asking what's going on, or suggesting professional help. Others were openly hostile, accusing him of abandoning Carol when she needed him most. The speed and coordination of Carol's campaign was terrifyingly impressive. She had done this before. She knew exactly how to control the narrative, how to turn public opinion. Then my phone started ringing. Several of Dad's oldest friends called, confused, concerned, caught between Dad's silence and Carol's dramatic narrative. I recognized the names, people who'd known Dad since before Mom died. I was at a crossroads. Defend Dad publicly or let the legal process unfold. Over lunch, my colleague and friend, Sterling Brooks, offered wise counsel. Stick to the facts, he advised. Let the legal process play out. Anything you say now can be twisted against him. Carol is a master manipulator of public opinion. He suggested I state it was a private family matter being handled by attorneys, and I couldn't discuss details. It felt reasonable, not defensive. So I adopted that line, politely deflecting calls and messages. Some people accepted it. Others pushed or openly sided with Carol. It was agonizing to watch people Dad had known for decades believe her lies without even asking for his side. But Carol wasn't done. 3 days after moving out, she showed up at my office building, attempting a full-blown confrontation in the lobby. I was returning from a meeting when I saw her arguing with the security guard. Dressed impeccably, makeup perfect, she was playing the role of the concerned stepmother trying to reach her troubled stepdaughter. The guard was politely explaining she needed to be on a visitor list, but Carol was insistent. It's an emergency. I need to see her now. The moment she spotted me, she surged forward before security could react. You destroyed my family, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the polished marble lobby. You turned Dad against me with your lies. You're a vindictive brat who never grew up. Everyone stopped, stared. Security moved to escort her out, but Carol only got louder, screaming about how I'd been jealous of her and Megan from day one, how I couldn't stand seeing Dad happy, how I fabricated evidence because I was a spoiled child who couldn't share. 2 guards took her arms, guiding her towards the door, but she kept yelling, calling me names, threatening to sue me for defamation. My HR representative, bless her, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, steering me quickly towards the elevators, away from the chaos. Up in her office, she meticulously documented everything, had me write down Carol's exact words, and ensured a formal trespass warning was issued. The entire explosive incident captured on the building's security cameras. My HR rep, serious and reassuring, mentioned that workplace disruption like this was taken very seriously. She asked if I felt safe, if I needed additional security. I was shaking with adrenaline, but I nodded, just wanting to ensure Carol couldn't come back. That spectacle Carol made? It actually worked in our favor. It exposed her true personality, her viciousness when things didn't go her way. Several coworkers witnessed the meltdown and immediately offered to provide statements. Sterling, who was in the lobby, described Carol's performance with clinical precision later. He noted how quickly she'd switched from charming to vicious, how perfectly calculated her word choices were, even in the middle of a supposed emotional breakdown. It was like watching someone try to appear unstable to avoid accountability, he said, but she couldn't quite commit to the act. My manager called me into her office, checking on me, mentioning she'd seen similar situations before and that company resources were available. Crucially, she noted that the security footage clearly showed Carol as the aggressor, and me, calm and professional. That mattered. By the end of the day, the incident had circulated through my entire department. People I barely knew were stopping by my desk, asking if I was all right. The support was unexpected and genuinely helpful. It made the whole isolating ordeal feel a little less lonely. The following week, Donald Larson filed for legal separation on Dad's behalf. The filing was a bombshell, including meticulous documentation of financial exploitation, copies of Carol's previous marriage and divorce records, bank statements detailing transfers to Megan's accounts, unauthorized credit card charges, and a clear timeline of her predatory pattern across 4 marriages. Crucially, it also included Megan's text messages and her sworn statement about Carol's coaching and manipulation tactics. The filing was detailed and damning. Carol, predictably, hired an aggressive attorney. Threats of defamation and harassment immediately started flying. Her lawyer sent blistering letters, demanding Dad retract the accusations, pay Carol a hefty settlement for emotional distress, and threatening a countersuit if he didn't comply. Donald, calm and collected, had anticipated this. He had responses prepared for every single threat, politely reminding them that truth is a defense against defamation, and that every single accusation in the filing was documented with evidence Carol simply couldn't dispute. The legal back and forth began in earnest, a grueling exchange of demands and evidence. Donald warned Dad, this could take months. It would get expensive. But Dad, his resolve hardened by all the revelations, didn't care about the cost anymore. He wanted Carol held accountable. He wanted to make sure she could never do this to anyone else. 2 days after the separation filing went through, Eve called me. Someone had reached out to her, a woman named Coraline French. Her father had been married to Carol about 12 years ago, and she'd seen Carol's name in the court documents. Coraline wanted to talk, had documentation, and believed her family's experience could help Dad's case. I agreed to meet her. Coraline showed up, precisely on time, carrying a thick folder under her arm. She was probably in her early 30s, with tired eyes that spoke volumes of a difficult past. We found a quiet corner booth. She opened the folder, spreading papers across the table. Marriage certificates, bank statements, credit card bills, divorce papers. The pattern was identical, exactly what Eve had found. Coraline's mother died when she was 16. Her father met Carol about 6 months later. Carol moved in within 3 months, bringing 8-year-old Megan. At first, Coraline said Carol was sweet, always asking about her day, offering to help with homework. But things shifted rapidly after the wedding. Carol started subtly suggesting Coraline's things were taking up too much space. Maybe she should move to the smaller bedroom, so Megan could have the bigger one with the attached bath. Her father, like mine, agreed. Carol's excuse? It would help Megan adjust. Coraline showed me bank statements, painstakingly tracing money, leaving her father's accounts in increasing amounts over 3 years. Small transfers, initially, then larger. Credit cards opened in his name that he knew nothing about until the bills arrived. A home equity loan for renovations that never happened. By the time Coraline's father caught on, he'd lost over $100,000. When he confronted Carol, she simply packed up and left within a week. No explanation, no apology, just gone. Coraline's father had tried to pursue legal action, but Carol had been careful, obtaining his signature on most documents, even if she'd lied about their purpose. His lawyer told him it would be almost impossible to prove fraud since he'd technically authorized the transactions. He gave up after spending another $10,000 on legal fees with no results. Coraline had always wondered if Carol did this to other people. The moment she saw the court filings with Carol's name, she knew she had to reach out. She wanted her family's story on record. Maybe, this time, Carol wouldn't get away with it. I took photos of all her documents, my heart heavy with shared experience, and thanked her profusely. "I just hope it helps," she said, her tired eyes softening slightly. "And I'm so sorry you went through something similar." The moment Coraline left, I sent everything to Donald, explaining who she was and her father's harrowing experience. He called me within the hour, his voice energized in that distinct way lawyers get when they've found the perfect piece of evidence. "Multiple victims," he declared, "with documented patterns. This strengthens Dad's case significantly." Donald suggested we immediately schedule a meeting to discuss expanding the legal action from simple separation to a full civil lawsuit for fraud and financial exploitation. Dad was hesitant when we met in Donald's office the next day. He kept repeating how stupid he felt, how he didn't want everyone knowing how badly he'd been fooled. "Dad," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "Carol is a professional. She's done this successfully to at least 3 other men before you. If we don't pursue consequences, she'll just find another widower to target." Donald added that with Coraline's testimony and documentation, combined with the evidence from Dad's own accounts, they had an incredibly strong case. Carol had a clear, undeniable pattern of behavior that showed intent to defraud, not just bad financial decisions. Dad finally agreed to move forward with the civil lawsuit, but he needed a few days to process it all before making it official. The weight of it was immense. That same week, Megan started texting me, asking if we could talk. I ignored the first few messages. I didn't trust her motives, but she persisted, eventually sending a long, desperate message. Carol was pressuring her to lie in court. She didn't want to commit perjury. She needed to get away from Carol, but had nowhere to go. I hesitated. Letting Megan into my space, into my life, felt fundamentally wrong after everything she'd done. But Sterling, ever the pragmatic voice of reason, pointed out the legal advantage. If Megan was willing to testify honestly, it would be huge for Dad's case. He also suggested that perhaps Megan was genuinely trying to break free from Carol's control, that she deserved a chance. I called Megan back. I told her she could stay at my apartment, temporarily, but there would be strict rules. No touching my things. No going through my stuff. Absolutely no drama. She agreed immediately. 2 hours later, she showed up at my door with a single suitcase and eyes swollen red from crying. Setting up Megan in my guest room felt utterly surreal. This was the person who'd made my teenage years a living hell, who'd taken my college fund, who'd mocked me at every family gathering. And now she was sleeping 20 feet away, and I was supposed to help her. I made it crystal clear. This arrangement was temporary and strictly conditional on her complete honesty with Dad's legal team. She understood, she said, her voice small, just kept thanking me for letting her stay. The first few days were a tightrope walk. Awkward. Tense. Megan mostly stayed holed up in the guest room. We barely spoke beyond basic logistics, but through the wall at night, I could hear her crying, and it made me deeply uncomfortable. For so many years, she had been the enemy. Sterling, seeing the emotional toll, recommended a therapist named Kiera Bulick, who specialized in family manipulation and trauma. I gave Megan the number. She made an appointment for the following week. Watching Megan start therapy, watching her grapple with her guilt, was harder than I had expected. She'd come home from sessions looking utterly drained, sometimes attempting to apologize for specific cruelties she'd inflicted years ago. Part of me, the part that craved peace, wanted to accept, wanted to move forward. But another part, the one still scarred, remembered every cruel word, every broken belonging, every lie she'd told Dad about me. I had to keep reminding myself. She was both a victim of Carol's manipulation and someone who'd actively participated in making my life hell. Those two truths could, incredibly, exist at the same time. Meanwhile, Donald's legal team was building an ironclad case, poring over every financial document they could access. Then, a paralegal made a groundbreaking discovery, something buried deep in Carol's recovered emails, apartment applications, in another state, dated 2 months before Dad ever mentioned the adoption plan. Carol hadn't just been reacting. She'd been actively scouting new places, meticulously setting up her exit strategy, all while simultaneously pushing Dad to adopt Megan and change his will. This wasn't opportunism. This was premeditation. She'd been planning the final phase of her elaborate con, setting up her next life in a new state, while systematically squeezing the last assets out of Dad. Donald's eyes gleamed when he saw it. This evidence made it virtually impossible for Carol to claim she'd acted in good faith, or that the financial issues were just misunderstandings. The timeline proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that she knew exactly what she was doing. She'd planned her departure, her escape, all while feigning devotion. Carol's attorney, seeing the writing on the wall, reached out, desperate to negotiate a settlement. Carol would return some of the money they offered if Dad dropped the fraud claims and kept everything quiet. Donald strongly advised against it. Accepting a settlement, he explained, would prevent any criminal charges from being filed. Carol needs to face real consequences, he insisted, or she'll absolutely do this again to someone else. Dad looked at me, a silent plea in his eyes. He asked what I thought. I told him the same thing I'd said before, with renewed conviction. This isn't just about getting your money back, Dad. This is about stopping Carol from destroying another family. He sat with that truth for a long, heavy moment. Then he told Donald to reject the settlement offer, to move forward with both civil and criminal charges. Donald connected Dad with the district attorney's office. They were very interested. The DA suggested Carol's consistent pattern across multiple states could be prosecuted as a larger fraud scheme, perhaps even organized criminal activity. They wanted to interview all the victims, review all the financial evidence, before deciding how to proceed. The stakes suddenly were astronomical. The next 2 months were a blur. Meetings, interviews, mountains of document reviews, legal strategy sessions that ran late into the night. Coraline testified about her father's devastating experience, providing every piece of evidence she had. Then, after hearing about the case, 2 more of Carol's ex-husbands came forward, both with eerily similar stories of financial exploitation. And Megan? She gave a detailed, heart-wrenching statement about Carol's relentless coaching and manipulation tactics, including specific conversations where Carol had explicitly told her how to play Dad's emotions. The DA built a formidable case: fraud, exploitation of vulnerable adults, theft, and even forgery on some of the financial documents. And then, 3 months after that initial, shattering confrontation at the coffee shop, it happened. Carol was arrested at her new apartment in another state. Bail was set at $50,000. She was considered a flight risk, with connections in multiple states and a proven pattern of disappearing when cornered. Her family couldn't post it immediately, so she spent a week in county jail before someone finally paid. Dad called me when he heard about the arrest. His voice was shaking, a strange mix of relief and profound nausea. "I feel relieved," he whispered, but sick at the same time. Relieved she's finally facing consequences, but sick that I let it go on for so long. I told him Carol was a professional, a master. He shouldn't blame himself for being targeted by someone who had perfected this con over years. He appreciated it, he said, but still felt he should have seen it sooner. Should have listened when I tried to warn him 8 years ago. I didn't disagree with him. How could I? Megan sat in the witness chair for the grand jury, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. The high ceilings of the room made every sound echo, and she kept twisting her hands together, a nervous habit, as the prosecutor fired questions. She confirmed it all. Carol had coached her on exactly what to say to Dad, how to exaggerate the differences between their house and her biological father's lavish home, how to make Dad feel perpetually inadequate, like he always needed to prove himself. The prosecutor then asked, chillingly, if Carol had ever discussed targeting widowers specifically. Megan nodded. Slowly, she explained that Carol would literally scan obituaries, then attend grief support groups, scouting for men with money and young children who needed a mother figure. She described conversations where Carol mapped out timelines, calculated how long it would take to access accounts, and planned exit strategies, all before even meeting the targets. Her voice dropped to a near whisper as she admitted Carol had told her that men who'd lost their wives were easy because they were desperate for someone to fill the empty space. The sheer, predatory coldness of it all. The college fund. The prosecutor brought it up. Megan confirmed she'd known the money came from my mother's life insurance. But Carol, she claimed, had told her I didn't deserve it because I was ungrateful and cold. She testified that Carol had opened accounts specifically in Megan's name to hide assets, transferring money in small, insidious amounts to avoid triggering bank alerts. The session lasted 3 agonizing hours. When Megan finally emerged, she looked utterly exhausted, her face pale. I was waiting in the hallway. The prosecutor had suggested my presence might help her stay focused on the truth. She walked past me without making eye contact, and I didn't try to stop her. 2 weeks later, Donald called. The grand jury had voted to indict. Carol was officially charged with 6 counts of fraud, 4 counts of exploitation of vulnerable adults, and 3 counts of theft. The DA explained that the multiple counts covered different victims and different time periods. If convicted on all charges, Carol could face up to 15 years in prison. Donald said Carol's attorney immediately started pushing for a plea deal. The evidence was overwhelming, and a trial would be incredibly risky. They wanted to negotiate down to probation and restitution, with no jail time. The DA's office asked Dad what he wanted. He said he needed to think about it. That night he called me. We talked for over an hour, wrestling with the question. Would prison time actually accomplish anything? Or was it just revenge? I looked inward, searching for my own truth. It's not about revenge, Dad, I finally said, my voice quiet but firm. It's about making sure Carol faces real consequences, so she'll think twice before doing this to someone else, before destroying another family. He agreed, but I could still hear the profound exhaustion, the lingering ache in his voice. After that, something shifted between us. Dad started asking to meet for coffee every week, not to talk about the legal case, but just to talk. The first time he asked about my actual job, instead of just a vague acknowledgement that I worked in finance. I explained how I analyzed investment portfolios, helped clients restructure assets. He asked specific questions, seemed genuinely interested as I described a complicated corporate merger I'd worked on. It felt profoundly strange, having him pay attention to my life after so many years of being invisible. He wanted to know about my apartment, my friends, if I was dating anyone. I kept my answers short at first, my guard still up. I didn't trust that his interest would last, but he kept showing up. Every week, he kept asking questions, and slowly, cautiously, I started sharing more. By the 4th week, he admitted it. I don't really know you as an adult, he said, his voice laced with regret. I checked out of your life when you were 17. I missed everything important that happened after. He asked how I'd managed working 3 jobs through college. I told him. The overnight shifts at the campus library, the grueling weekend catering gigs, the summer internships that barely covered textbook costs. He asked what it felt like watching Megan post her sorority photos, funded by money that should have been mine. My voice grew tight. It felt like watching someone wear my mother's face as a mask, Dad. Living the life I was supposed to have, while I scraped by on ramen and student loans. I described graduation, sitting there, watching other families celebrate, knowing he was at Megan's recital. His face went gray as I told him I'd cried, truly sobbed, in the bathroom afterward because I felt so completely, utterly alone. He asked about the dean's list announcements he'd never acknowledged. I pulled out my phone, showed him screenshots of every academic achievement I'd proudly posted online, every one he'd scrolled past without a single comment. He looked at each one, and I watched him realize with agonizing clarity just how thoroughly he'd erased me from his life. I spoke of nights working until 3 a.m., dragging myself to 8 a.m. classes. The time I got sick during finals, couldn't afford a doctor, and just pushed through with a fever. Watching roommates go home for holidays, while I picked up extra shifts because I couldn't afford a plane ticket and knew I wasn't welcome at his house anyway. He asked why I'd never told him how hard things were. I tried, Dad, I reminded him, my voice cracking. I called during my sophomore year, desperate, asking if there was any way to access even part of the college fund. Carol answered. She told you I was being manipulative, trying to guilt you. He didn't remember that conversation. That's the problem, Dad, I said, a bitter truth. You let Carol rewrite reality so many times. You couldn't tell what was true anymore. He just sat there, staring into his coffee. I don't know how to fix any of it, he mumbled. You can't fix it, Dad, I told him, the raw truth hanging heavy in the air. Those years are gone. Nothing will bring them back. He looked utterly defeated. What can I do then, he asked, his voice cracking, to make things right? There's no magic solution for 8 years of damage, I explained, my own heart aching. You can't give me back a college experience without crushing debt, where I actually had time to join clubs and make friends instead of working every spare hour. You can't give me back a graduation where my father showed up and was proud of me. You can't undo choosing Megan over me 1,000 times, in ways both big and small. You can't return the college fund that would have let me start my career without $40,000 in student loans. You can't erase the years of feeling erased, replaced, and worthless. I watched him absorb each painful truth, saw the immense weight of it settle on his shoulders. He asked again, a desperate plea, Is there anything at all I can do? You can start, I said, looking him squarely in the eye, by being my father now, today, and proving through your actions that you mean it. Not grand gestures, not throwing money at the problem, just consistently showing up, and actually seeing me. He nodded, a silent promise. I'll try, he whispered. Trying isn't enough, Dad, I countered, the words firm, unwavering. I need commitment. I need follow-through, because I am done accepting scraps of your attention. Donald, ever the strategist, recommended we work with a mediator, someone to help us establish clear boundaries and expectations. The mediator was a sharp woman in her 50s, specializing in family reconciliation. She was excellent. She didn't let either of us hide behind vague promises or deflection. I told Dad plainly that rebuilding trust would take years, not months, and that every single time he chose comfort over honesty or avoided a difficult conversation, he'd be setting us right back to zero. The mediator pressed us for specifics. What actions would demonstrate commitment? I listed them out, responding to my calls and texts within a reasonable time frame, remembering important dates without me having to remind him, asking about my life without me needing to volunteer information first, and crucially, never comparing me to Megan or suggesting I should be more understanding of Carol's situation. Dad surprisingly agreed to all of it. The mediator even made him repeat back what he'd heard, to ensure he genuinely understood the gravity. We scheduled monthly check-ins to assess progress, to address problems before they spiraled into crisis. I made it unequivocally clear, if he backslid into his old patterns, I would walk away, and I would not give him another chance. He said he understood. The mediator noted it in her file. Carol's attorney, facing the mountain of evidence, finally negotiated a plea deal that avoided a full trial. She pleaded guilty to 4 counts of fraud and 2 counts of exploitation, in exchange for the other, more severe charges being dropped. The deal included $60,000 in restitution, to be paid over 5 years, 3 years of probation, and 6 months in county jail, with credit for time served. She was also strictly prohibited from contacting Dad or me for the entire duration of her probation. The judge accepted the plea, and sentencing was scheduled for the following month. Dad called me after the hearing. His voice was heavy. He said it felt like partial justice, but still not enough. 6 months, he said, felt like nothing compared to 8 years of insidious manipulation and theft. I agreed with him. It wasn't much, but I reminded him Carol would have a criminal record now. Future victims, if they looked, could find it. Sometimes, I told him, partial justice is all you get. He confessed he'd hoped for more. And, Dad, I gently reminded him, hope was what got you into this situation in the first place. He went quiet for a long moment, then a sigh. You're right, he admitted. Megan, surprisingly, decided to stay in town, not following Carol wherever she ended up after jail. She told Dad she needed to keep working with her therapist, to truly understand how Carol's manipulation had twisted her entire worldview. She got a job waiting tables downtown, and then she started paying Dad back, small amounts, towards the college fund. Dad told her it wasn't necessary, but she insisted, explaining she needed to take responsibility for benefiting from money that was never meant for her. Her first payment was $50. She handed it to him in cash with a quiet apology. Dad tried to refuse, but she just left it on his kitchen counter and walked out. The next month, another $50. I didn't quite know how to feel about Megan's attempts at restitution. $50 a month wouldn't even make a dent in what was taken. But I could see genuinely that she was trying to do something concrete, something meaningful, beyond just words. Dad asked if I thought he should accept the money. I told him that was between him and Megan. I wasn't going to weigh in on their relationship anymore. That was their journey to navigate. 6 weeks after Carol's sentencing, Dad put his house on the market. The place, he admitted, had never truly felt like home after Carol moved in. She'd systematically changed everything until none of Mom's presence remained. He wanted to start over, somewhere that didn't have Carol's fingerprints all over it. The house sold quickly. He bought a smaller condo across town with big windows and a peaceful view of the park. He called me. Would you help me decorate it? He asked, his voice tentative. Specifically, what do you think Mom would have liked? My heart warmed a little. I met him at the empty condo, and we walked through the rooms, talking about Mom's taste. Deep blues, warm woods, plants everywhere, lots of natural light. We spent the afternoon looking at furniture online. I showed him photos of Mom's favorite pieces from our old house, before Carol had stripped it bare. He saved each photo. I want to honor Mom's memory here, he said quietly. We ordered a navy blue couch, a coffee table made of reclaimed wood. He asked about plants. Mom loved ferns and succulents, I told him. The following weekend, we went to a nursery, filling his car with green things that needed care, attention. Taking care of something living, he mused, a small, genuine smile touching his lips, might be good for me. I wholeheartedly agreed. For months, melted into a routine. Strange at first, but deeply comforting. Every Thursday at 6 p.m., Dad would show up at my apartment, grocery bags clutched in hand, brimming with ingredients for whatever online recipe he'd discovered that week. The first few dinners were awkward, quiet. We both focused intensely on chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, anything to avoid talking about anything truly real. But slowly, imperceptibly, the silences grew less uncomfortable. The conversation began to flow more naturally. He'd ask about my projects at work, and he'd actually listen when I explained the complicated financial models I was building. I told him about the promotion I was up for, and he'd ask thoughtful follow-up questions, never once changing the subject to talk about Megan. The second week, we burned the chicken to a crisp and ended up ordering pizza, laughing, truly laughing, about how Mom used to set off the smoke alarm at least once a month with her cooking experiments. The third week, I showed him how to make her lasagna recipe from memory. He took the first bite, got quiet, and then his eyes welled up. "It tastes exactly like I remember," he whispered. By the sixth week, we'd found our rhythm. He'd handle the main dish, I'd make the sides. We'd talk about everything and nothing. Office politics. Whether we should try growing tomatoes on my balcony. There were still painful moments, of course. Moments when he'd inadvertently mention something from the years we'd lost, and that familiar anger would surge in my chest. Once he started a sentence with, "Remember when Megan," and caught himself mid-word, apologizing profusely. I told him we couldn't pretend those years didn't happen, but we also couldn't let them define everything going forward. He nodded a solemn promise. "I'm trying to figure out how to be your dad again," he said, without erasing my mistakes or making excuses for them. Megan and I occasionally crossed paths at Dad's new condo when our visits overlapped. The first time was incredibly tense. We stood in his kitchen, making awkward small talk about the weather, while Dad hovered nervously nearby. But I could see a change in her. She was working double shifts at the restaurant, taking online accounting classes, genuinely trying to build something legitimate instead of simply coasting on other people's money. I asked her once, genuinely curious, why she stayed in town. Why not start over somewhere new, where no one knew about Carol's crimes? "Running away," she said, her voice quiet, "feels like something my mother would do. And I'm tired of following Carol's patterns." We weren't friends, probably never would be, but we'd reached an uneasy understanding. We could exist in the same room without hostility. She'd even send me occasional texts about Dad, letting me know if he seemed down or if she thought he needed company. And I, surprisingly, found myself doing the same for her, mentioning when he'd asked about her classes or seemed proud of her progress. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. More like a mutual acknowledgement that we'd both been damaged by the same person, and we were both in our own ways trying to heal. I still remembered everything she'd done, every cruel comment, every stolen belonging, every lie she'd told. But I could also see she was working hard to become someone different, and I respected that effort, even if the past could never truly be erased. Then, one Tuesday morning, Dad called. He asked if I could stop by his condo after work. His voice held that careful, tentative tone he used when he had something important to discuss, but was unsure of my reaction. I showed up around 7. He was sitting at his kitchen table, a folder overflowing with paperwork spread out before him. "I've been thinking about the college fund," he began, his gaze fixed on the table. "How I stole your future to fund Megan's party years." His voice was thick with regret. "And even though I can't give back what was taken, I want to invest in whatever comes next for you." He pushed a document across the table. It was a new education fund, in my name, with enough money to cover law school, a graduate program, whatever path I wanted to pursue. I stared at the account statements. The balance was astronomical, enough to cover tuition and living expenses for years of advanced study. "It's not about the money, really," he said, his eyes finally meeting mine, earnest and vulnerable. "It's about finally showing up for you, the way I should have all along." Something cracked open in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of it. For 8 years, I'd watched him pour resources and attention into Megan, while treating my accomplishments as if they didn't matter. Now he was putting his money where his apologies were. making a concrete investment in my future instead of just saying sorry. I admitted I had been thinking about law school, but hadn't seriously pursued it because of the daunting debt. "Apply wherever you want," he said, a genuine smile this time. "Don't worry about the cost. This is my way of giving you back the opportunities one stole." 6 months after everything truly began to unravel, I sat with Dad in his living room, surrounded by dusty boxes of old photos he'd pulled from storage. He'd packed them away, hidden them, after Carol moved in. She told him that looking at pictures of dead people was morbid and unhealthy. Now, he wanted to remember Mom properly, to talk about her without guilt, without Carol's insidious voice in his head telling him it was time to move on. He showed me pictures from their early dating years, photos I'd never seen before. Mom, radiant, laughing at some restaurant, her hair in a style I didn't recognize. He told me stories about their first apartment, how Mom had insisted on painting every single room a different, wild color, driving their landlord absolutely crazy. He spoke of her dream to be a teacher, how she'd volunteered at the library, reading to kids, even when she got too sick to work full-time. He said she would have been so proud of who I'd become, how I'd survived college, working 3 jobs, built a successful career, and exposed Carol's con to protect him, even after he'd failed me so badly. Sitting there, looking at Mom's smiling face in those old photos, a profound realization washed over me. Exposing Carol hadn't just been about the money, or even about revenge. It had freed Dad, freed him to finally, truly grieve, to remember what real love looked like instead of Carol's cold, calculated manipulation. He'd spent 8 agonizing years with someone who saw him as a target, not a partner. And now, finally, he could process Mom's death without Carol's poison twisting his memories, tainting his grief. Maybe I thought that was the real victory. Not the criminal charges, not the restitution payments, but giving Dad back the ability to remember Mom honestly, to move forward, without someone exploiting his grief ever again. This journey has been long, painful, and incredibly complex. But seeing my dad heal and knowing we stopped Carol from hurting anyone else makes me feel like it was all worth it. I'm curious, have any of you ever had to fight to protect a loved one from someone manipulative? Or had to rebuild a relationship after a major betrayal? I really want to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.